I think in this 3 minutes, what I'd love to do is share ahead of this travel-related panel some of the insights we get from our own Mastercard data. If, for example, we were talking about AI, the sorts of hyper-granular data we can see is the AI adoption rates, for example, in Singapore and Vietnam have been soaring as leaders around the whole of the ASEAN region, for example. But let's just talk specifically about what we've been seeing in terms of tourism. And the first thing I want to show is the dispersion story. We've been seeing an increasing amount of spread of the time of year of visiting, as well as the locations that people and travelers, tourists are going to. It's been a post-pandemic phenomenon that we think is quite long-lasting. So if we take a look at the first example of this, in the case of, say, Indonesia, we can see that the bars along the bottom here all represent the share of the annual spending by month on cross-border inbound travelers spending on lodging. Now, of course, we could look at other categories. Let's just look at that focus. And we can see that in the months of May and June, those are the two that have seen the biggest growth compared to 2019. But when you look at the share, May and June are much smaller months in terms of their share of annual spend compared to the July, August months. Yet May and June have been rising more. It's a trend we see all around the world of this so-called shoulder season, where the peak periods of the year are not the ones that have grown as much as some of the more surrounding parts of the year. So you can see, for example, if I switch over to, say, taking a look at another economy in the ASEAN region, let's take, for example, the Philippines, we can see a similar kind of pattern, where in June, as well as in May, we've seen quite good growth, as well as July in the growth of spending has been very high. September, also a standout. Meanwhile, September was one of the lowest months in terms of the share, as you can see down the bottom here, of the total annual expenditure. So the good news is, when you think about what the challenges really are for trying to have sustainable tourism, reduce bottlenecks, and more opportunities for employment in more places on the time of the year, we can see that spread, but also in where people are going, in the places where the employment opportunities could lie. Here, we look at the top 5 locations in the case of Malaysia, where in 2019, on the left, we can see it was nearly 80% of all the cross-border spending was going into the top 5 places. That's down to 74%. Meanwhile, the next 10 have risen from 11.5 to 14%. That's in the case of Malaysia. Let's look at it for Indonesia, a very similar kind of story, where we also have seen this drop from being a lion's share of all the spending going in the top 5 places. It is starting to spread out more. Consumers want to spread out where they're going, where they're visiting. It means more places have more job opportunities. The dispersion is clearly on the rise. Now, there's a lot more where that came from, or we could talk about it further in more granular detail, but I just thought those 2 points as a quick data drop ahead of this session would be a useful context setting from the Mastercard Economics Institute. So thank you very much for your time and attention, and have a great rest of the conference. Thank you.